I know we talked about Trump last week. We probably talked about him the week before that. And I think we'll probably be analyzing the Trump phenomena, going forward, because it's important and it's big, the phenomena and, its relationship to the war, to the capitalist crisis, the elections, the crisis of the capitalist parties, and perhaps things that we don't even know about. There's a new phase in this phenomena, crisis, however we want to characterize it. I think it's finally reached a point where a lot of people, including a lot of people who consider themselves leftists or liberals or progressive, whether they're in labor or whatever, have gotten over the idea that, Trump is just a comedian, and it's a charade, which it is in part, and it doesn't mean anything, and, there's no need for a response to it. The other things that seem to be more important to respond to in terms of attacks on the workers. It took his call for a ban on Muslims coming into the country to do that, I think it's a little late, but better late than never. His call for mass deportations of Mexicans and other immigrants, mostly from Latin America, should have been the warning sign that this was very, very bad. And some other things he said. And of course now, the bourgeois candidates in both parties, the bunch of them that are in the Republicans and a smaller number in the Democratic Party, are now denouncing him, and, they denounce him as he pushes them to the right. It's a very sort of terrible kind of thing that's going on, insidious thing that's going on. Well, we're not for banning all the Muslims, we're just for banning an awful lot of them, and I'm supporting this legislation. But by the way, I denounce Trump, and it's so hypocritical, and it's getting so annoying hearing them talk about this is un-American. And this is not our values. This is exactly the values of U.S. imperialism. He's saying what they all believe in, what they all think. We built the U.S. imperialist empire on racism, genocide, national oppression, smashing the working classes wherever we could on bombs and tanks and prisons, it's such bullshit. Thank goodness that at least in this room we're revolutionaries. We need to win more people over to revolutionary communism and socialism, so we don't have to be subjected to this alone, It's important to remember now that more and more people are referring to Trump as a fascist. Even when we had our first organizing meeting, it must be a few weeks ago, for this December 20th event, we weren't sure how far to push that. Should we make fascism the big thing? It seemed to go over well. Fascism may not necessarily be a term that a lot of workers are familiar with. But because of what's happened over the past week or so, now the bourgeoisie is writing columns. Is Trump a fascist? And one of the right, not Woodward. Who was the other one that was on? Bernstein was on TV early today saying, "Oh, he's a crypto fascist." I don't know what that is. A crypto fascist. It's one of the things that it's important for us to remember, and for us, it's a question of remembering, because in Workers' World Party, we have a strong sense of the black question, of the national question, the significance of slavery, and the development of U.S. imperialism. In this country, most often when fascism has been dangerous, its manifestation has been white supremacy. A violent mob, white supremacy, lynching, or the police killing black and brown people. We we should never forget that, in the early part of the 20th century, in the 20s, half of the governors in this country, not only in the South, but throughout the Midwest and some other places, were either actually a member of the KKK or openly supported by the KKK. And at that time, at its height, the Klan had more than 4 million members. This is a form of fascism, you see. So, especially when we're talking to a black radical, we be careful about lecturing them about Europe and all that, I mean, fascism is, we can define it, and we will perhaps a little bit, not exhaustively tonight. But, mass incarceration, the police war on black and brown people, particularly young people, conditions in the oppressed community, it can be called, and we certainly wouldn't argue with anybody who was characterizing that as fascist. And that's part of the history of this country. And it should inform progressive people, especially white progressives, be they in anti-war or labor or whatever. Actually, the hope is that to the extent that it hasn't happened up to this point, and as you can see, the Black Lives Matter movement is still raging. I mean, look at Chicago. Wow. Look at Chicago. I mean, it's not a done deal, but they may actually force Rahm Emanuel to resign. I mean, Chicago is a huge city. What's it, like the third or fourth biggest? It's Chicago, After Chicago, it's next is New York, or Los Angeles. It's a big deal, And of course, what's going on in Baltimore and Minneapolis and other places. I hope that, this new awareness about the danger that Trump may represent, one of the outcomes of it is a lot of activists who have, up to this point, have not really been as supportive as they should or could be of the Black Lives Matter uprising. That they say, no, this is the same thing. This is the, Rahm Emanuel and Trump, they may sound different, but, it's very similar. What's happening to oppressed people is very similar, Is Trump a fascist? We'll be talking about this, I think. We'll be returning to this, if not every week, whenever we can, in classes and study groups. Well, what is fascism? Let's look at the quickest, simplest definition of it. It's not just the rhetoric, although that's part of it. It's not just the strong white man coming to save people from the oppressed and all that, and playing to people's fear and whipping up racism and xenophobia and so forth. That's all part of it. But ultimately, it is another form of bourgeois rule. That's what fascism is. It's another form of bourgeois rule that a section of the bourgeoisie at a given place and time may feel they have to resort to if they feel that bourgeois democracy is not effective for their class rule. That's what it is. And there are some features to it. There are many features to it, but I'll give you a couple of the most important ones. You can't have fascism without a mass fascist movement that is reactionary, that's usually, whites in Europe or in this country, poor, unemployed, formerly thinking themselves middle class, who because of an economic crisis and perhaps some other crisis, make themselves available to be formed, to be whipped up into a mass movement that is violent and that is turned against workers, unions, revolutionary and progressive groups, women's groups, LGBT groups, and in this country, most often the most oppressed, black and brown people. That's one big feature of it. You can't have fascism without a mass violent movement. Stormtroopers, black shirts, Ku Klux Klan, Nazis, White Citizens Council, whatever you want to call them. They fall in that category. The other thing is a crisis of such magnitude where the ability to maintain class rule or stability or control is so threatened that some in the ruling class, in the capitalist ruling class, feel that they have to resort, at least temporarily, to another form of capitalist rule, i.e. fascism. What is the crisis? It's not terrorism. It's not ISIS. That's a subject we've been talking about, and like Trump will explore that and deepen our analysis of that and how we explain it to revolutionaries, to progressives, and to the working class. But at this point, ISIS and terrorism and the war, that's not the crisis, that's the excuse. That's the excuse for calling for fascist and racist measures. The crisis is the crisis of capitalism. It's this capitalism at a dead end. Globalization, and specifically in this country, but all over the world, what it's done to the status of a lot of white people who formerly thought of themselves as middle class, many of whom were always workers unless they were petty bourgeois and owned something like that, but now who are being pauperized. And this is where the white supremacy comes in. Follow me on this. We're not writing off the white working class. To the contrary, there are sections of the white working class that are going to be revolutionary. And we need them. And the oppressed need them. But we're not blind to the problem. One of the ways white supremacy has worked in terms of maintaining order and political stability based on the crumbs that the capitalists get from imperialism, is, they can promise a section of the white workers or the middle class, or however you want to characterize it, they can promise them that whatever your problems are, we'll make sure you do better than the oppressed, So it could be worse. You could be black. This was so true in the South. The poorest white people living in shacks without hardly a pair of shoes. Well, at least we're doing better than the blacks. So that's how the white supremacy sort of came down from the top. And they're doing it again. They're doing it again. What's the problem? We're being taken over by Muslims. It's not just they want to kill us. They want to change our religion. They want to bring their religion. They look funny, and they're like Mexicans too, and black people and everybody else who looks different. Underneath this is their pauperization. And in tandem with that, the decline of U.S. imperialism, which is freaking the U.S. imperialist ruling class out and having its reverberations, in sections of the white working class and the middle class. And the crisis is getting worse. Another thing we'll be talking about, especially as events warrant it, is how the global capitalist crisis is spiraling downward. The stocks can go up and down. If you just use a day or even a week as a measurement, you probably, they were down last week or down last month, they were down in August, then they're back up for some reason. With that caveat, I'll say they were down today. They went down more than 300 points, down about 1.5–2%, all the major indexes. Why? A number of reasons. Biggest reason, the price of oil hit a new low. But it's not just about the price of oil. It's about the price of copper. It's about the price of iron. It's about the price of all the commodities that the capitalists use to produce. The price of all those things are going down. Why? Because there is global-wide overproduction. And the phenomena of deeper and deeper, what's the word I'm looking for? not it's tied to overproduction. Hold on a second.
Recession?
No. Deflation. The phenomena of deepening deflation, which is usually accompanies overproduction. It's getting bigger and bigger. Sooner or later, it affects the markets, no matter what the bankers and the Fed does to keep the market pumped up. Next week, they might raise the interest rates half a point, but based on what's happening now, they may be afraid, and that will just be a confession that they feel that the global economy is so bad and so shaky that after 5 or 6 or 7 years, I don't know how long it's been, they can't even raise the interest rates a half a point, which should be insignificant, really. Where is all this going? Trump, the danger of fascism. It's too early to tell. To a large extent, it's part of the bourgeois elections. That may change. Maybe somehow Trump will get pushed out. Some other candidate will be the one that's the leading Republican candidate. Maybe a lot of the fascist organizations that have been around who claim that they're getting more members because of Trump. Maybe when he moves aside, he's not an ideologue. He's a demagogic capitalist politician. It's hard to predict what will happen to him. We know what he's playing to. We know what he's toying with. But it's still too early to say what he will ultimately be in any kind of fascist development. And this is, in a way, this is sort of phase 2 of experiments with fascism in the recent epoch. The first one was the Tea Party. It seems to me that this one is even more dangerous. It's debatable. It's open to argument. Where's it going? We'll see. But it behooves us to monitor it and take it very, very seriously. And maybe even dedicate a party conference to it where we invite everybody to come and discuss this crisis. And I think if we did that, it may not only be well attended, but it might just be a contribution to the working class movement and even some of our opponents. Just put that on the back burner there. In the meantime, we know what not to do, and we should advise everybody accordingly. Do not run to the Democratic Party out of fear. That would be the worst thing to do. If we have learned anything from history, when fascism has developed, whether it's in Italy or whether it's in Germany or whether it's in Spain or whether it's in Indonesia, the worst thing to do is to depend on some section of the ruling class. You make the fascists stronger. That's what you end up disarming the working class. And in one way or another, helping the fascists. Who are thugs? Those who know better in the working class movement and amongst the oppressed know that, among other things, including, effective propaganda, the working class sometimes has to reorganize itself to defend the oppressed and to defend other organizations and to be prepared to do it, to meet violence with violence. That's a real understanding of fascism. No shop owner, no Arab or African Muslim shop owner should fear a fascist attack. And if we have to, our numbers are not large, but we will be amongst those who are organized to defend the oppressed. And consider that job not insignificant or marginal, but central to our response to a fear of fascism. That was the second point, making sure that we defend the oppressed. you could say solidarize ourselves with the oppressed, but I like defend the oppressed. There are lots of ways you can do that. We just described one, setting up defense squads, when and where necessary to do that. But also mass mobilizations that are called for the explicit purpose of solidarity and defense of the oppressed, the targets of the fascists. And this is what December 20th is about. This is what our comrades and friends did in North Carolina was about. And it was so brave and so splendid, and they got in those racists' face. And there wasn't a lot of them. And they got up, Black Lives Matter, and everything else they chanted. That's what you have to show the fascists. You have to show the fascists that no one's lying down to be rolled over. We will fight you. We will fight you inside your meetings. We will fight you outside your meetings. And if you dare come in our meetings, we will do more than fight you. You may not leave. You may not walk out our meetings. This is not bravado. This is the only way you can, this is what history has taught us. It's the only way you can fight this phenomena, if you understand its danger. Ultimately, we must fight it ideologically. And that means deepening on every level our struggle for revolutionary socialism. We must show the working class, including white workers, the oppressed will understand it sooner, perhaps, I think, that there's another way out of this crisis. It's not fascism, it's not white supremacy, it's socialist revolution. And think about it. We were talking about Bernie Sanders and how, his rise, at least people are talking about socialism. That's actually the opposite. That's sort of the other side of the reaction to the capitalist crisis, that more people are talking about socialism and low-wage workers and Black Lives Matter. That's part of it too. But you notice with Paris and with what happened in California and with Trump, who the media he doesn't have to spend 5 cents. Right. They just give him all the media he wants. What was that old saying? The capitalists will sell you the rope to hang them. Some of it is designed to build them up, but some of it is just capitalist media stupidity, I think. And it's part of the crisis. We've got to be the ones that says there's a revolutionary alternative to a fascist danger. That it's not just fear. Defense is important, but it's by getting out of the crisis, by ending the system. And we say that does not imply that we are not prepared to block with anyone, regardless of their program, who wants to fight white supremacy and fascism. We'll do that. We're not for being ultra-left, in the face of a fear. However, we will not water down our program. To the contrary, I think we've got to use the election campaign to raise the question of socialist revolution. How can we let people be talking about fascism when we're not talking about socialist revolution? Something is wrong. We can't let that happen. People are talking about extreme things that they don't talk about. Let them talk about the extreme of socialist revolution. And let us find imaginative and effective ways so that people won't think that, we're smoking something, to bring this to the masses. Anyway, the December 20th mobilization is extremely important. It is, in the immediate future, the way that at least progressives in the tri-state area, and perhaps beyond that, can solidarize themselves with the oppressed who are under attack. And I don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 days or 9 days before it. I don't know what shoe will drop, what terrorist attack will take place that might affect it, or what ban. I think we're having trouble getting a permit. Maybe Sarah, if she feels it's necessary, will inform us about that. But we need to shut down Fifth Avenue. We need to take this struggle against fascism, the danger of it, and racism. We need to take it to Fifth Avenue, which is the right place to go 5 days before Christmas. We need to take it there, and we need to get as many people as we can get, and hopefully a lot of white folks. It's great to have the Muslims and the Arabs and the Africans and the Latinos and the Haitians, and hopefully they'll come, and we'll do everything we can to make their participation possible. But we need a lot of white folks too. It's got to be multinational, you know, and it's an obligation that we should take serious. This is not just a mobilization. This is the beginning of a serious struggle.